closed down. From our both our facilities have been closed and remain closed. But you know, we are working behind the scenes at home as we shelter in place to continue to bring programming to everybody. So Sarah's out on the beach. She just responded to a gray whale not too long ago, for instance, that came up on our beaches south of here. Sue, our education coordinator, is working on content for parents to work with their kids at home. Big thing that a lot of parents in our area are facing, or all over the place really are facing. Karan's continues to work to create more dome content and get things ready for when we reopen. Trey, who you probably haven't met yet, is our new manager of our Discovery Center. He's working to figure out ways to make that Discovery Center safe in the post-COVID era, and how we can have a museum that protects our employees as well as our guests. So we're doing a lot. And I'm continuing to work on our partnership with Urchinomics on creating a new purple urchin aquaculture facility in Bodega. So we have a lot still going on. Don't think that the quietness means that we're not doing anything. We're working hard to get some of the stimulus money to help us get through this really rough time. This is going to be hard for all small businesses and all local nonprofits. So if you have the means and you can support your favorite nonprofits, please do. It's a great time to become a sustaining supporter of the Noyo Center, for instance. noyocenter.org/donate. You can make a donation or become a member. We're also going to be launching, I'm happy to say, through the generous donations of a few of our donors, a matching campaign. So while we're in this COVID era, we're going to be up to $13,000. Each dollar that you donate to the Noyo Center will become $2. So we'll launch that in the next couple of days. So look for that. We also are starting an online store because we can't sell anything out of our little museum shop. We're gonna start to try to bring in a little revenue from an online store. So that's another thing to look forward to. So with that, that's the general what we're up to. I will begin our program, I think. I'm super happy to welcome Julia Parrish to the Noyo Center and to our new online Science Talk series. We'll continue to do these kind of series as long as, these kind of online talks as long as we can. And I think actually we'll probably utilize this even as things open up a little bit more, because we are in a remote area. It's hard to get people to come. So we will try to use this more as a way to bring cutting edge science to you. When I was reading about COASST, hopefully you all know about COASST at this point, but when I was reading about Julia's program, when I was getting ready for this talk, I was happy to see that it was started in 2000. I mean, I didn't realize it was such an old program. You've really been doing this a long time. It is by far one of the best programs I have seen in my career that is bringing not only cutting edge science to the science community, but utilizing community and resources and bringing good data to the community in a way that lay people can understand. Julia has done an exceptionally good job. And as Sarah and I try to build out our own beach monitoring program for local beaches, we look to COASST as one of the best examples of how to do it right. We haven't ever been able to host Julia ourselves, but I've heard her talk and I'm really looking forward to seeing what she has to tell us, because she really connects the data that they collect with a lot of the oceanographic trends we're seeing, and it brings so much interesting information to our community. So with that, I will introduce Julia, who is coming to us from the University of Washington and the founder of COASST. Take it away, Julia.
Thanks, Sheila. Hi, everybody. This is really fun to do. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see a PowerPoint presentation, because of course, we academics, we live for PowerPoint. Okay. So you all should see a PowerPoint intro slide, and Sheila, just talk out loud if that is not working.
It looks good. You're good.
Okay, great. Happy to be with you all on the 50-year anniversary of Earth Day. Just want to point that out. I wish I was there in person, seeing everybody and spending some time on the Lost Coast. But hopefully we'll at least be able to connect here via Zoom. Uh-oh, I cannot advance. That is not so good. Let's see, space bar. Oh, okay, good. So I want to just start by saying something about Earth Day. Many of you may know this, but some of you may not. Earth Day, the origins of Earth Day go back to a huge oil spill in 1969 that was basically a blow up of a oil well off one of the rigs off Santa Barbara. And you can see in this beach map here, the oil slick covered just an amazing, amazing amount of coastline from Santa Barbara down to Ventura, with the extent of the oil going up to Pismo Beach and down past basically all the way down to Coronado, and also reaching out to the Channel Islands. So you can see this is actually a picture of the rebuilt rig that blew. And there's a picture from 1969 of somebody trying to rescue a very oiled grebe on the beach. So just thousands of marine birds were oiled, marine mammals, just countless fish and invertebrates destroyed. And it really caused an outrage, not only of the Santa Barbara community, but certainly all up and down Southern California. And the outrage actually reached nationally until there were senators and Congress people involved from both sides of the aisle, from the right, from the left, coming together and focusing a lot of attention on this bill and the aftermath of this bill. And so the legacy of this bill was the passage of quite a lot of national legislation and the start of Earth Day, which we're now celebrating the 50th anniversary of. So I just want to give a nod to Earth Day, and that it was about beaches, and it's about people on beaches and people seeing change and getting angry that they're seeing a great place that they love to go to destroyed and wanting to make a change. And so that's the second nod that I want to put out there. And that's to this man, Aldo Leopold. So Aldo Leopold has since passed on. He wrote many books. The one he's most famous for is the Sand County Almanac, the book that you can see here. And Aldo was a wildlife biologist and a forester. He was a hunter. He did a lot of writing. He did a lot of science. And he invented something known as the land ethic. And this is a quote, a set of quotes actually, from the land ethic, which is one of the essays in the Sand County Almanac. We can only be ethical in relation to something we can see, understand, feel, love, or otherwise have faith in. When we see land, and I would substitute the marine environment, he was a forester, but we're beach people. So when we see the marine environment as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. And I think that this sentiment goes hand in hand with Earth Day. It basically says that we share the planet. We share the planet with many people. We share the planet with many other organisms. We are part of habitats. We are part of the natural community. And we need to really think about that and how we can use the natural environment with love and respect. So here's another starting point. This is the Audubon Christmas bird count. This is a starting point of citizen science. And the Audubon bird count, I don't know whether many of you know this, was started by Frank Chapman, who happened to be a curator of birds at the American Museum of Natural History, which is the big museum in New York. And prior to the start of the Christmas bird count, Frank and his buddies used to go out on Christmas Day to Central Park, which was a pretty wild place at that time, with their guns. And they used to have a competition to see who could shoot the most birds. In the late 1800s, Frank was already beginning to see that this was creating a shift in the populations of birds in Central Park. And so he decided that rather than shoot them, he was going to count them. And that was the beginning of the Audubon Christmas bird count, which is one of the longest running citizen science programs in the country, if not in the world. And so now we know a lot from the Christmas bird count. So this is a slide that I show a lot. It's about one species, the bird shown here, the Carolina wren. And little guy, just tiny little guy, but bird counters have been counting Carolina wrens for a long time. So you can see two graphics here in the middle of this slide. The one on the left is about the population center, and the one on the right is about an index of abundance, or how many Carolina wrens there are. And both of these graphics are over time, from 1966 to about 2006. And so what you can see over time on the left-hand side is that although it's really noisy, messy, over time the population center of Carolina wrens have been moving up latitude, have been moving to the north, at the same time that the population has been increasing. So what is going on here? What's going on here is that as the world has warmed just a little bit, just slightly, not a huge amount, we can see an expansion of this species. So the habitat available to Carolina wrens has changed over time, and that population is responding by moving north. And we know that because we have Christmas bird counts of this species and many, many other species from not just hundreds, not just thousands, not just tens of thousands, but hundreds of thousands of people. It's an amazingly, amazingly successful citizen science programs. So let me tell you about some other citizen science programs. This is one of my favorites, COASST, Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow program. This is a precipitation program, and you can see in the map here, all the little dots are COASSTers. And they are using pretty low-tech equipment. You can see this in the photographs. So they have rain gauges that they use. They use your basic ruler to measure the depth of snow. And I have to say, they have one of the best ways of measuring hail. When it's hailing out, people run outside with a piece of aluminum foil, and they put that on the ground. After the hailstorm is over, they count the number of dents. And they can measure the size of the dents. So super low tech, super great. But COASST data is now used to fine tune what we do from weather satellites. So without these data, we wouldn't know about sharp definitions between where it's raining and where it's not raining, where we might have floods happening. And that's all happening because people are out there with their rain gauges. And this is one of my favorite citizen science programs for kids. This is the Lost Ladybug project. It started out of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So maybe it's the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and Bugs, in particular ladybugs. This program is so cool because it teaches grade school kids the difference between introduced ladybugs and native ladybugs. And you can tell that because they have different colors on their shells and different spot patterns. So they're super easy to identify as adults and super easy to categorize. So not only do kids learn about species and learn about introductions, but they also have a really great time out there capturing ladybugs and counting them. So what's the goal of citizen science? Well, there are 4 goals that I like to talk about. Science, and that's what I do because I'm a scientist, but from the individual point of view, there's enjoyment. Like you should have a good time in the project that you're involved in. There's also education, and science and education are two poles of one continuum. So we'd like to think that everybody who's involved in a science project is learning about science, not only that particular kind of science, but science in general. And then a fourth goal that a lot of people talk about is a community goal. So if there are a lot of people collecting information in a certain place, we can learn a lot about what's going on there, and communities can take charge. And I think the Noyo Center is a fabulous, fabulous example of that, of taking charge of local science and putting that together. Okay, so the big question here from a science point of view, from a mainstream science or academic science point of view, is can citizen science be another part of the toolbox of science, right? Can we add to how we do science by using citizen science? And you might be able to tell from my enthusiasm, answer is yes. So two things I want to just point out about citizen science. One is it's free choice. So unlike my students at the University of Washington who don't have a choice about being in the class that they're in, participating in citizen science is free choice. So if you don't like it, you can walk away. And that's cool because that means that when we, the project designers, are putting things together, we have to really take people into account and think about them a lot. The other thing is that good citizen science is both citizens, is people, and I don't mean citizens of the country, I mean citizens of the world, citizens of the environment, citizens of the earth on Earth Day. So the other half is science, right? And so a citizen science project gives people an authentic science experience with real science outcomes. That is, we can't do it without you. So I want to spend the rest of the talk talking about the project that I run, and that's the COASST project. And COASST stands for Coastal Observation and Seabird Survey Team, so COASST with 2 S's. This is a shot of our website. I invite you to go there at www.coast with 2 S's.org. And in COASST, we're a pretty wide-ranging project, so we come all the way down just past Humboldt into the Mendocino area. So I think we run down to Elk, that's our southern point, and we go all the way up through the coast of Washington. We leap over Canada. We have a sister program, British Columbia Beach Bird Survey in BC, pick up in Southeast Alaska, run around the Gulf of Alaska, out the Aleutian Islands to the Commander Islands at the tip of the Aleutian island chain. The Commanders are actually in Russia. We go over the Alaska Peninsula into the Bering Sea, and then up into the Chukchi Sea, and we actually nip around the corner now, all the way up to, we're just starting things out in Barrow. And we are in about 90 coastal communities, many, many sites, between 400 and 500 sites. And for our beach bird program, we found about 81,000 carcasses of about 185 different species over that period of time. So here's COASST in the main office, where a lot of really, really great people. You can tell they're all happy except me. I'm the only one who never smiles. So if you join COASST, or if you are a coaster, you've run into Hillary Burgess, our science coordinator, who I think is actually on this Zoom. And Jackie Lindsay, our volunteer coordinator. We have a variety of researchers working with and for us, and of course our always cheerful undergraduate interns. And what does it mean to participate in COASST? So if you're a beach birder in COASST, you're signing up to go out on a beach. You'll spend between 1 and 5 hours on that beach, depending on the beach, depending on how wide it is and the length of beach that you choose. That's up to you. So you and your partner or partners will survey that beach for beach cast carcasses, so literally birds that have washed in on the tide. And when you find them, like the person in this picture, you will drop to your knees, open a book, take out your measuring equipment, and figure out things about that bird. So let's go into that. If you're trying to figure out what a bird is, you need a book. You need a book that doesn't have jargon in it. So our book doesn't look exactly like this. It looks more like this. Coast Beach Birds. We actually have 3 field guides, one to the lower 48 West Coast, one to Alaska, and we actually have a 3rd guide to the North Atlantic. And you're looking at the cover of the West Coast guide. And here's how we do bird ID in 3 easy steps. Very first thing is we use the feet. So it turns out bird feet are super cool. Just answering one simple question, are the feet webbed, or are the toes free, or are they lobed, can really help you sort out the bird in front of you. Even if you only know 2 things, it's a bird and it's dead. So after you go through the foot key, you'll reach a stop sign, and that'll take you to a foot type family shown here. So this is the foot type family Alcids, and you can follow the arrows, answer a few more questions until you get to a box, also with a stop sign, and that's got species in it. And then you go to the species page. So this is the species page for puffins. Puffins are one of the groups inside of Alcids. So the guide is laid out in a super easy way, and this is what we use to identify species. And we do that with the data that coasters collect on the beach. And so what do? They figure out the foot type. That's one piece of data that they're writing in their data sheets. They are taking 3 measurements using dividers shown here, and measuring in millimeters or centimeters. So the measurement of the beak of the bird, the measurement of the wing chord of the bird from the wrist to the tip of the longest primary, and the measurement of the foot of the bird. So with those 3 measurements, plus the foot type, and 2 photographs, one of the belly of the bird and one of the back of the bird. And the super cool thing about a photograph of a dead bird is you can pose the bird. So it can fill the screen. You can do it over if you didn't get it right the first time, and you can actually put a ruler, and in this case, a slate, right there in the photograph. So we actually have one of the largest collections of dead bird photographs, well over 300,000 of them. Okay, so some people ask me, gosh, you know, if they're not trained scientists, if they don't have a PhD, are they really accurate? You know, is this really working? And so this is a great question. So we answered this question. So this is what coasters think about themselves walking into a training. So this pie chart represents all coasters who have answered the question, what do you think your level of birding expertise is? Are you an expert? Are you just advanced? Are you intermediate? Are you a beginning birder? Or do you have no experience at all? And it's actually kind of interesting to consider somebody who has no experience. Are they unsure that it's a bird or not? Or are they just being cautious? So one interesting thing about coasters is walking into a training, you sign up to spend 5 hours on a Saturday or a Sunday with us being trained. Walking into a training, just half of the people are saying they're beginners or they have no experience at all, right? So they are not expert birders. Only about 15% of people who do COASST think of themselves as advanced or expert birders. So that means that these people, when they come into a training, they don't know, they don't have 80 species memorized. But look what happens. So here's a graph that shows you on the x-axis, so the horizontal axis, how many carcasses coasters have found, so previous experience. And you can see that the biggish circles, which represent more people, are over towards 0. That is, we have a lot of people that are just beginning in COASST or are on very non-birdie beaches and don't see many carcasses over time. And on the y-axis, the vertical axis, you can see carcass-specific accuracy. So what's that? That is, for any carcass, what's the chance that you're going to get it right? And you can see that this, the bubbles go up over time, and then they get to a plateau or an asymptote. So we're going to look at a few of these places in this curve. So walking out of a training, after only 5 hours, people have gone from being beginners or no experience to getting 7 out of 10 carcasses correct. And that's phenomenal. I mean, what that tells us is that the training works and that people can get it right away and that they walk out being virtual experts. It's going to take them a few more carcasses to get up to that asymptote, but actually not very many. So after about a year, maybe a little less than a year, they're going to be almost at 90%. So almost 9 out of 10 carcasses correct, which is just great. So we can prove in the COASST program that, one, we can train people and we can do it really well in a short amount of time. And two, they get better with practice. So just like practicing the piano makes you better, going out month after month and finding new birds makes you a better coaster. But the great thing about this is we can show the scientific community and we can show the state and federal and tribal agencies that we work with that these data, coaster data, are really, really good data. And these people are very, very good at what they do. And that makes the data instantly usable in science and in resource management, which is what we're after. We're not just after training people, we're after using that data to say fundamental things about what's going on in the marine environment. Okay, you might be wondering, who wants to go out on a beach and look at a dead bird? I mean, many of them didn't just flutter down from the sky and die gently on the beach. Many of them are discombobulated. They've been in the water for a number of days. They might not be all there. They may be the victims of a predator or scavengers, that is, predators going after the carcasses. So let's just take a little perambulation in who does coast. Lots and lots and lots of different people do coast. And you can see that they're young, they're old, they're male, they're female, they're of all demographics, they're right-leaning and left-leaning politically. There's nothing that describes coasters other than they have a really strong attachment to place. They love their beach. And they go there regularly and they want to know what's going on. And that makes them really wonderful data collectors because they don't want to see the next new thing. They want to know the pattern of what's going on in their beach. So let me introduce you to a few coasters and share with you some of the demographics of coast. So just in our occupations in general, you can see here a bunch of different occupations. Most of the coasters are retired. Certainly, we have a bunch of people in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, in education, but business, health, students, self-employed people. So coasters do lots of different things. Average age is 51, but we have a wide range, more females than males, and lots of 2 or 3 generation families. Oh, come on. Okay, so few men, fair amount of dogs. This is Olli Ollikainen. He's one of our oldest coasters on the Oregon coast. And Olli, like many in coast, are in STEM and or are educators. Olli has a husky, and that's because he went to the University of Washington, so he would never have another dog than a husky. Olli is such a dedicated coaster that he and his fellow coasters on the beach create a float for the annual 4th of July parade in Tillamook. You can see them here, the dead bird surveyors. So lots of STEM people, lots of educators like Olli, and unknown number of them with dogs. Okay, lots of best female friends. You might recognize these women, Charlene, and Helen and Sarah from your neck of the woods. So 65% of coasters are female. Of course, I like to say that's because women are smarter than men and they like good citizen science programs. So lots of women who have been friends for a long time do coast together. In fact, 33% of coasters are retired, and folks that may have met each other before coast or in coast. So the average age at training is 51. But kids also do coast. So this is one of my favorite photos. This is little baby Sierra. Sierra's a little bit older now, but Sierra and her mother Charlotte from an Alaska beach. So there is Sierra, a future coast volunteer, out with mom and their dog. In fact, all sorts of kids do coast. We were really fascinated to discover that 15% of coasters are in 2 or 3 generation families. So kids and parents, kids and grandparents, kids and parents and grandparents. And it's really fascinating to see who joined first. So lots of parents are joining because of their kids and taking their kids out on the beach. So going out and finding dead birds is actually a family activity. But it's also a romantic one. So we have, that we know of, 3 marriages that have resulted from people finding each other on the beach in COASST, and they weren't swept away. They're continuing to do their citizen science beaches together. So 3 marriages and no divorces. So not only is finding dead birds on the beach a family activity, but it can be even a romantic one. Okay, so really COASST is all about people. So this graph is a kind of geeked out way to look at all coasters. So coasters are the dots, and bigger dots are people who have done more surveys, and smaller dots are people who have done less surveys. And the dots are overlaying each other. So in places where there's a lot of color, so it gets really dark, you can tell a lot of people are overlaying over each other. So what's on the x-axis or the horizontal axis? It's the cumulative number of different people that you've gone out with. So a lot of people only go out by themselves. So they're at 0. They've never had a partner, which means on the y-axis, the average number of partners that you go out with over time is also 0. So people at 0, 0 are true loners. They love the work, but they want to do it by themselves. They want to be Aldo Leopold out there contemplating the environment and interacting with it by themselves. Also, lots of people go out on pairs. So 1 person at a time. So the average number of people that go out with is 1, but over time they may switch partners. And you can see that we've outlined them there. And then lots and lots of people go out as teams. And so you can see they have more than 1 partner at a time. What are the red circles? The red circles are what we call the nexus people. So they're the people that have lots and lots and lots of different partners over time. In fact, there are coasters that have had 60 or 70 different partners over time. I mean, that's just huge. And so we got really curious about those people, and we thought, who are those guys? And how connected they are they to each other? So here is a social network graph of COASST, where every single person is a different colored circle, and the color tells you something about the year you joined. And the lines between signify that people have gone out on surveys with each other. And this is amazing to us. So when we do this full network analysis, and we add in everybody who's even done 1 COASST survey, this network is 949 different people. And it's not that they all know each other, but I went out with her, and she went out with him, and he went out with them, and they went out with her, until we're all connected. So one really, really cool message about COASST and about citizen science is it's about the people. It's about the social networks that people make, whether they live with each other in a house, whether they're in a family, whether they're friends or co-workers, whether they meet each other on the beach. You have to take people into consideration. And that gets us back to Earth Day, right? It's about people sharing an experience in a habitat like a coastal environment and wanting to keep it safe and wanting to keep it protected. So you can't do citizen science and design citizen science without thinking about people. Okay, but you also have to think about the science, and that's the so what question. So we can bring people into COASST, we can train them well, they can get out there, they can be super good, they can get 9 out of 10 carcasses correct, they can entrain their family and their coworker and their friends, but can we do science with it? So this is one thing that people ask a lot. What do we find in COASST? So the black histograms are all COASST. So coast-wide over the full range from California all the way on up to Alaska. This is what we find. And in fact, I've organized these species, these taxon, by all COASST. So the single biggest percentage of birds that we see in COASST are common Murres. Just about 33, maybe 34% of the birds are common Murres. and northern fulmars next, and Cassin's auklets after that. The red bars are California, including Humboldt, our Northern California section, and Mendocino, our section just south of that. So you can see also the three biggest players in California overall, common Murres, and I'll talk a little bit more about common Murres in a minute, large immature gulls, such as the young westerns shown here, and also large grebes, western grebes, as in the photograph shown here. And I've just put little X's by species that we haven't found so far in the Mendocino area, including tufted puffins, white-winged scoters, short-tailed and sooty shearwaters, and glaucous winged gulls. So a little bit different California is from coast-wide, but also quite similar, seeing a bunch of the same things. And again, Murres, gulls, grebes, cormorants, all big players. So one of the really fun things about COASST is because there's so many people out there collecting so much information, we get to see a lot of rare birds. This is one of the rarest birds we've ever seen in COASST. It is species, I believe, number 183, and this is the purple gallinule. So those of you who know your birds know that this bird breeds actually on the other side of the continent and down in the Caribbean. So we see this bird in Florida, but we do not see this bird on the West Coast. In fact, I believe this was the first record of a purple gallinule in Washington State, and this wing only was found on a beach that's out on the Olympic Peninsula. But look at this photograph. This is a fabulous, fabulous dead bird photograph. So just one wing, but because we had a lot of information about that wing and super clear photographs, and we knew the wing cord, we could actually get it to species, even though the COASSTers couldn't. And so that's one of the powers of COASST, is we can record these way out of range birds. Here's another thing that we can do with our rare data. For every carcass that's found, we record whether there's any oil on that carcass. So this is a map of the outer coast of Washington, and just showing where we're finding chronically oiled birds. So chronic oiling is that phenomena where we find a oiled carcass, but there's no oil spill, right? There's no smoking gun. There's just a single carcass there. But when we put all of these together, so we can see a few things. Common Murres are very susceptible to oil spills, and to oiling. And so when we ask of all of the birds who gets oiled, common Murres are the most frequently oiled, and then northern fulmars, super interesting. And when we map it out, we can actually see that there's a concentration of oiled birds in the southern outer coast of Washington. And it just so happens that that's a major shipping route. So ships that are coming up and down the coast and coming out of the Columbia River and going north, that may be leaving little droplets of oil, little splashes of oil. Because of the oceanography of the situation, that's going to come into the coastline there, and that's what we think we're seeing. So based on this data, which is coast-wide, we actually got a grant to study chronic oiling and to be able to create simulations of oiling, so we can try and reproduce that chronic oiling pattern. So it's really exciting to us that we can actually start to nail down, why are these birds at risk, and why are we seeing lots of common Murres and secondarily northern fulmars and gulls. So that's a very cool thing about the COASST data. But one of the most important things about the COASST data is that we can get a sense of the baseline or the underlying pattern. What are you going to see month in and month out on your beach? So you're looking at a graphic with time on the X or the horizontal axis in months, and you're looking at encounter rate. How many carcasses might you find on that beach and if you walked a kilometer and you searched the whole beach from the water's edge all the way on up to the vegetation for a kilometer run of beach. These data come to us from the northern coast of Oregon, but the pattern is typical of the outer coast of the lower 48. And it looks kind of like a mountain range with 3 humps in it. So you're looking at the black line, that's the mean or the average, and then there's that yellow wash, which is sometimes thicker and sometimes thinner. And that's a measure of the variability. So let's figure out who those mountains are. The first one is common Murres. And you can tell that that peak occurs in about August in the northern coast of Oregon. So at that time of year, the Murres are finished breeding and we have a lot of exhausted parents and inept chicks. And so we're getting a lot of Murres on the beach. In fact, coasters know that if they don't see any Murres on the beach in late summer, early fall, they start to wonder, what happened? Was there no breeding? So in fact, this is a peak that we expect. The second peak is a winter kill peak. So it's on into the season, it's colder, it's darker, there's more storms, it's harder to survive. In fact, worldwide, about half of the marine bird kills, maybe more than that, are going to be winter kill. It's just exposure. It's hard to survive in the wintertime. On the northern coast of Oregon, the winter kill peak is predominantly this bird, northern fulmars. So fulmars breed in Alaska, but they come down to the lower 48. In fact, Sarah Grimes and I were talking just before this webinar started. This year, especially in March, there was a whole die-off of northern fulmars all the way down the California coast. So not just down to Mendocino, but south of Mendocino, all the way down to San Diego, and we fully believe on into Baja. So northern fulmars actually at an odd time of year in March. Normally we'll see them in November, December. Then there's a little echo boom here. This is the spring migration. This normally happens in March. In fact, just the time we saw the fulmars. So occasionally it's fulmars. In northern Oregon, it's this bird, rhinoceros auklets, and this is the wave of birds that are flying back north. And in fact, again, in California this year, the fulmars that we saw on the beach in March, those birds are going back north to breeding. So while we think that post-breeding mortality and winter kill, those first 2 big peaks are normal peaks, we worry more about the spring migration peak. And that's because those birds should be fat and sassy. They should not be dying. So that's a conservation concern to us. So one thing we can do with that baseline signal, that black line with the yellow wash, is we can look at it against actual time, and that's the gray bars. So in the years 2010 to 2011 in the north coast of Oregon, here's what we actually saw. It was a big winter kill year. It wasn't so big for post-breeding mortality, and it was normal for the spring peak. And we can actually stretch this out over time so that it looks like this, so that we see the baseline over and over again. It's kind of like a heartbeat, like an EKG graph, and you can see all those gray bars, and they are suggesting what really happened. And so it stands to reason that the gray bars are more or less fitting into that pattern, and that's because, of course, the gray bars define them, because the black line is the long-term average. So over this period of time, from 2006 through 2014, things were pretty normal in the north coast of Oregon, but take a look at this. Add a few more years and you can see, wow, sometimes there's a catastrophic event signified by the red bars. And by the way, if you want to look at these graphics up close and personal, you can go to the COASST website to explore our data, and you can make these graphics yourself by choosing what place you want to be along the coast and which species you want to look at. So every now and then we see a catastrophic signal, a big wow out of mortality, as we did in 2014 going into 2015 with Cassin's auklets. And I want to tell you the story of at least one of those. But before I do that, I want to convince you that there are a bunch of science reasons why coast beach birds makes a difference, including looking at climate impacts, doing oil spill modeling, looking at the effects of harmful algal blooms, changes in predator distribution and abundance, the effects of fishery bycatch and fishery competition. We've looked at disease outbreaks. We have an incredible marine debris program, and we also look at changing habitat. So lots and lots of different science things. And I'm going to tell you just one of those science stories. And it's a story about Murres. Now remember, Murres are a big player in California, representing about 50% of the birds found. So the population, actually this is wrong. That's the wrong population. I think that's my population for Cassin's auklets. So don't look at that. Size. This bird's about 1 kilogram. It's a football-shaped bird, and you can see it here. So a short stubby tail, and it can retract its neck. So when it's flying, it looks like a football with wings. Lives to about 20 years. Eats forage fish. Those are the pizza-sized fish like anchovies and herring, small sardines. Occasionally, it'll eat krill or small shrimp. It's a surface nester, and it takes both parents to raise a chick. The conservation concerns we have about Murres include oil spills, fishery bycatch, and climate. So here are some photographs that we got from Alaska on January 1st, 2016. These are heart-rending photographs. These are photographs of not hundreds, but thousands of Murre carcasses that have washed ashore on just one beach, on Whittier Beach. And Whittier Beach is at the head of a small fjord that's in Prince William Sound. On this particular day, there had been a big storm the day before, and the wind was blowing up the fjord. So it pushed everything that was on the surface of the water onto the single beach. So very, very, very concentrated. But this is amazing. We have never seen so many birds on one beach. For this particular mortality event that went from summer 2015 through spring 2016, 62,000 common Murres were counted. Now, there's a lot of real estate in Alaska, and this die-off event ranged all the way down into California, but my goodness, 62,000 birds is more than we counted in the Exxon Valdez oil spill. 62,000 is a huge, huge number. What happened? So here are maps, and on the left side of your screen, you're seeing maps where we saw dead common Murres in Alaska in May through October 2015. And then on the right side, you can see November 2015 through to the next spring, April 2016. And so you can see that there's this concentration earlier in the year around Kodiak Island, out the Alaska Peninsula, and then hopping up into the Bering and actually into the Chukchi Sea. But come the fall, winter, early spring, super concentration in Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, and then out the Alaska Peninsula. And the lower maps are just the blow up maps. So a lot of this event happened in Alaska. In fact, of that 62,000, 46,000 of the carcasses were found in Alaska alone. So here's kind of a geeked out graphic. So Gulf of Alaska is on the top, and we're going down in latitude through Washington, Oregon, Northern California, the North Central California, and then Central California. And this data set is not just COASST, it's also Beach Watch and Beachcombers. So much like the baseline graphics I showed you before, you can see that line with the yellow wash, that's normal, and those gray bars are abnormal. So let's look down in Central California. In Central California and North Central California, you can see that the gray bars are way, way above the line, much more than normal. And on the right side, in the red, you can see how much more than normal, right? So above one is normal, and above 1 is more than normal. So in Central California, 10 times normal. In North Central, 5 times normal. So a lot going on there, a lot of birds. As you go north and get to Oregon and Washington, you can see again 5 and 10 times normal, slightly earlier in the year. But oh my goodness, look at the Gulf of Alaska. You might be thinking, Julia, you forgot to put the black line with the yellow wash in. And I would say, no, I didn't. It's just so small, you can't see it. And that's because late in the year, in December and January, the number of Murres on the beaches were 1,000 times normal. I mean, my goodness, that's unheard of. I mean, just the largest event of common Murres that we have ever seen. And again, huge in the Gulf of Alaska, pretty big in Washington and Oregon, kind of normal in Northern California, but then picking up again in Central California. So what do we think happened? Why did this happen? Well, first of all, you know that the water was warmer than normal. That's the blob of warmer than normal water that just sat on top of the Northeast Pacific Ocean actually for years. And that blob changed the type and the size of the prey available to predators, including birds. It made that prey much smaller. So we're not seeing forage fish as big, and we're not seeing them as abundant. So it made food harder to find. But at the same time, and this is so super cool, warm water increased the metabolism of the big predatory fish like cod and pollock. So it effectively made those fish seem bigger. They had to eat more. So a warmer fish eats more than a colder fish. So the warmer water made prey less available, made fish predators effectively a larger part of the ecosystem. And so they ate relatively more of those small fish. As a result of that, the Murres experienced huge increase in competition. So effectively way less food out of there and out of the environment, and it literally caused all of those birds to starve to death. So big changes in the ecosystem, both bottom up, changing the prey, and top down competition, making those bigger fish, warmer fish, eating more. Super, super cool science story. And COASST data and Beach Watch and Beachcombers data played a key role in that science story. Oop, didn't want to do that. I want to go here. Okay, so you can find that science story on our science updates page on the COASST website. That's under news and views. We make science updates of all of the scientific publications that use COASST data. So you can read the Murres story or the puffin story or the Kassensauklet story, lots of different stories. So here's another way of looking at all of the mass mortality events that we've seen. And I've told you one story, the Murres story. Unfortunately, it's not the only story. So let me just walk you through what you're seeing. There's a lot of color on this graphic, and there's what looks like a railroad going down the middle. And that's a timeline going from 2006 to present, month to month, all those little bars. What are all of the stripes in the lower part of this graphic? They are sea surface temperature anomaly. So the difference from long-term normal. So if you see a color, it's warmer than normal. The ocean is warmer than normal. So the lowest stripe there is Central to Northern California, and the uppermost stripe is the Chukchi Sea. That's snugged up right against the Arctic. So gold, warmer than long-term normal. Red, a degree above normal. Dark brown red, 2 degrees above normal. And this is centigrade, not Fahrenheit. So there's 2 things that you can see here. One is way up north in the North Bering Sea, but also in the Chukchi, it's been warmer than normal for a while. So when people up there say we're experiencing climate change, they are not lying. And you can see it in this graphic, at least since 2006 and earlier than that. The second thing that you can see is that round about the end of 2013, the whole ocean got stuck on warm from California all the way on up into the Bering and Chukchi, and it is still warm. in the north, in the Bering and the Chukchi. So what I'm going to put on that railroad is bubbles. And each bubble is going to represent a mass mortality event of seabirds that we have observed. The bigger the bubble, the bigger the event. So what happened before the ocean got stuck on warm? Here are a whole bunch of different bubbles, including one right on the crest of the heat wave of the blob. And you can see there are a bunch of different kinds of species: rhinoceros auklets, puffins, scoters, fulmars, black-legged kittiwakes. So a bunch of different ones. The bubbles are fair sizes. The scoters was a pretty big mass mortality event, and an event about one every year, every other year. Look at what happens after the ocean got stuck on warm. Oh my goodness, many more bubbles, much, much bigger bubbles. That huge big red bubble, that's the Murres story I told you about. The sort of pink bubble is Cassin's auklets, and the big blue bubble is shearwaters happening up in the north. And that big blue bubble is almost as big as the red bubble. So what we can take away from this is when we have a big change in the habitat that happens over thousands and thousands of square kilometers, it changes the prey base. It changes what the predators can see, and seabirds feel that. And we see mass mortality events. These data all together, collected by thousands and thousands of citizen scientists who are out there on the beach month after month, are giving us some of the best insight into what a warming world will look like for seabirds and for other top predators in the North Pacific Ocean and by extension worldwide. And it comes down to critically good citizen science and people out there collecting the data. Okay, so who cares? Well, coasters care. And coasters talk to other people. So this is a graphic of coasters who report who they interact with regularly, who they tell about COASST, the program, the data stories, what they found on the beach, how people can get involved. And you can see dark green, these are people you talk to often. Everybody talks to their friends and family, and especially now because that's who we're living with and seeing all the time. But we also talk to coworkers and other folks on the beach. We talk to neighbors, we talk to environmental groups. Everybody talks to everybody else. It's about people. And when people share science, good science, rigorous science, science that tells a story, science that can tell us what's going on in the system, science that can tell us what's happening on your local beach, this makes science powerful. But people don't just talk to people they know, they talk to others. So these are reports of communications with communicators like reporters and decision makers like politicians and resource managers. Now, coasters don't talk to these people regularly, but they talk to them sometimes. So you can either see this as a glass half full or a glass half empty graphic, right? So the majority of coasters have never talked to a reporter or a politician or a resource manager. And so you might say, well, you don't have much reach. Your program's not very effective. And I would come back to you and I would remind you that COASST has trained over 5,000 people. 5,000 people have collected data for us, and 20% of 5,000 people is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who have talked to reporters, politicians, and resource managers. So our largest reach, and the reason that we can act as an important conduit of scientific information to the federal government, to the state governments, to the tribal governments, and to other countries, is because people get on the phone, people get on the web, and they talk to politicians and decision makers. So this makes citizen science purposeful and powerful. But I want to get back to where we started, with Earth Day and with Aldo Leopold. So this is a photograph that we got the other day of a coaster named Laura and her 10-year-old grandson. And I love this. The whole family is spending lockdown together. So they're sheltering in place together. And Laura's grandson has become really, really interested in the beach surveys, enough that he wants to go out with her and he wants to learn. So he's learning about math and he's learning about science and he's learning that with his grandmother, right? So they are doing science together and it's connecting directly to his schooling. It is a way to get through COVID-19. And this is what we are seeing in the COVID-19 era, that you can use citizen science in the family. Okay, so this gets me to my ending point, and that is science is not something you should do yourself. Science is a team sport. And I am asking all of you to think about this question: who's on your team? Everybody is on my team, and everybody should be on your team. So if you want to know more and connect with us, you can get in touch with us locally through the Noyo Center. We work with the Noyo Center a lot. Virtually, you can connect with us on our website. You can connect with us at COASST with 2 S's at uw.edu, or you can call us on our landline and get through to us. And I just like to stop there and say, thanks so much for listening to me. I'm going to stop my sharing screen so we can get back and I can take questions, only easy ones, please. Sheila, you're still muted.
There, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Thank you so much, Julia. I can't tell you, I mean, I am always so freaking impressed by your presentations and your enthusiasm. I mean, I feel like I need to go make you a cup of tea, but I just wanted to take a second to introduce again Sarah Grimes, who I hope we're going to get her back up. She's our stranding coordinator, our beach survey person, also one of the Coast volunteers. So a real great nexus between a lot of the work we do with marine mammals and birds. We talk to Julia as well as Cass all the time to try to figure out what's happening in the ocean. So I hope Sarah's going to come. There she is. But Julia, I'm always struck when I hear your presentations about how much effort and attention you put into, I mean, I'm always impressed by how much you train and educate your volunteers, but also how much effort you put into understanding their participation and what they get out of it, who they are. And you just seem like you're light years ahead of so many people who try to do citizen science. That's so often not a component of the science program. And I'm wondering, does your team actually devote as much attention to understanding the aspects of the citizen science component of what you're doing as the science that they're collecting?
That's such a fabulous question. You know, when we started out, we didn't. When I started COASST, I would say I was a typical scientist, geeked out, loved data, thought about people as data collectors. And it took me a few years to realize, oh my goodness, people, when you think about people as people, it's great. They have so much more to tell you and so much more to share with you. So once I, the scales fell from my eyes and I realized there's a rich, deep literature out there in social science, in how people learn, in why people learn. And I realized that when you attract people to a program, whether it's at a science center, at a museum, at a zoo or aquarium, a national park, a state park, a program decentralized like mine, like COASST, you're inviting people to work with you. You're inviting people to share their time. And so you need to give them something back. And we really realize we need to give back to people and we need to ask people, are we doing the right thing? Can we do it better? And, there's a great concept in the tech world now called fail fast. And it's about getting out there and trying things out and being honest about, is this working? Is this not working? And I think when scientists, especially academic scientists, can get over trying to be perfect and just try and experiment and ask people questions and get people to give us feedback, we working together can make science so much better and so much more relevant. And, you know, when I got that photograph of Laura and her grandson, I'm just thinking to myself, yeah, that's it, right? That's a COVID cloud silver lining that we can extend learning. We can do it. We can homeschool, and we can do it with citizen science. So absolutely, there's so much more we can do when we work with people.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, from my perspective, I think there's so much we can learn from the science you guys are doing, but also the science of the citizen science that I mean, the fact that you're showing us who these people are and how they're experiencing it and what they're gaining from it and how they are motivated to continue on is just, it's awesome. And as I said, as Sarah and I try to grow a program here, we will look to you guys always as the benchmark for how to do that right. And, you know, it's so easy we're so busy all the time. It's so easy to, oh, we won't really be taking as much time to think about the experience of the volunteers as we are trying to collect the data. And that's really as critical an element as any of it, I think.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things that I do want to say and put an honest plug in, COASST is a geographically large program, but we could not exist if we didn't have strong community partners. And Noyo Center is definitely a strong community partner. So community partners are there for the long term for their communities. They know who lives there, right? You are all part of the Noyo Center. And so COASST is privileged to come in and be able to work with strong community centers. And community centers play this vital role because you can have many different programs going. So some people might really be into dead birds, but other people really want to do marine mammal stranding. And other people really want to do marine debris, or they want to do ocean temperature. And it's at a community science center that we can bring all those threads of data together at the local level and really see what's going on. So it's just, you know, without programs like the Noyo Center, COASST wouldn't exist. So
I wanted to chime in on how nicely we were dovetailing on this and how one wasn't going to replace the other, in that, Julia, if the COASSTers are out there and they run across a dead marine mammal, they're going to X the box. And they're also, thanks to the support of COASST, they're going to give me a call and report the dead marine mammal. So working together and dovetailing and not one or the other. And, you know, just a testament to this survey, I started a couple years ago, and I don't think I've missed a single survey. I mean, that's how geeked out I've become. It's like I have to get out there and do it. And that's why coming up on this next survey, I should be going out in the next couple of days with Randy, my partner. And, you know, it's like, oh no, this is the first one that I've missed and I don't want to miss it.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just that much fun if you get geeked out about it. And, you know, I love seeing everybody's names here. Hi, everybody. How cool that we're all coming together in this way. Hi, Josh, Mary Beth, George. Yes.
Well, you know, snaps to you guys for doing an online event. It's another COVID cloud silver lining to realize that online events, Zoom webinars can bring community together.
Yeah.
And in fact, can allow people who might not be able to leave their home or who are a little too far away to join and be part of community. We're finding this out in Seattle as well. And I just, you know, you go for everything you can get. But yeah, I imagine the future where every single coastal community we work in, and as I said at the start, we work in about 90 different coastal communities. It's huge. Every one has hundreds, if not thousands of people that are collecting data in rigorous, great programs connected to local science centers and programs like mine that are meaningful to them. And we can really put together comprehensively for the first time in history what the marine environment looks like and how it's changing, because people are collecting information in places they love about things that matter to them. I mean, we've never done that before. And this is the century for citizen science where we really can do that.
have a show and tell. I don't know if you can see this, but
Oh, yes.
This is a little wooden bead that has a number on it. And so people in Mendocino, all up and down the coast, of course, people complained about the little plastic zips around the birds, and people have seen them on our local beaches. But Coast responded by putting out some twine and some little wooden things. So they're, you know, just as a response to what people were saying. So I thought that was, had to share that. This new program has
Yeah, Sarah, thanks for bringing that up. It's
no, thank you for testing it and running it and seeing if we could do something that wasn't plastic and that would work. So
it was, I gotta say, it definitely some coasters from California gave us a first trial. We actually spent almost 3 years trialing, you know, is it twine? Is it yarn? Is it cotton yarn? Is it wool yarn? Can we do it sustainably? Is it color fast? Will it last on the beaches that are wet for 8 or 9 months, right? And we're trying out all of this stuff. And when we got to wooden tags, is the wood harvested sustainably, right? Because we can't be using wood that's not harvested sustainably, right? Does it have coatings on it that are going to be harmful to the environment? And they don't, right? The tag number is burned in, so no harmful coating, and the twine is jute. Yeah, so we come up with a solution like that, and people think, oh, this is great, and they just don't know there's almost 3 years of engineering behind that, and trying and rejecting a bunch of things. But we come up with something that's really sustainable and really simple, and we can make the program a little better. So yeah, it was great that we had people pushing and saying, change this, do better. And that's when we listen to people, we make our program better.
Yeah.
Great. Well, how about we take questions from the people, speaking about listening to people?
Yeah.
Okay, after a number of fantastics, there is, Hillary put up a link. If for anybody who wants to go to the chat, there's a link to both your upcoming trainings as well as your newsletter. So I'm sure you can get that on your website as well.
Yep.
Somebody has asked, let me get to it. You mentioned that you started a marine debris element to your program, and can you talk a little bit about what that research is showing?
So that program is much newer. And in fact, we are going to do a COASST webinar. Hillary has this. I think it might actually be at the end of this month. COASST stories, coastal stories. And one of those stories is going to be about marine debris.
May 1st.
May 1st. Great. And so you can go to the COASST website if you want more about that, and we'll send that information to Noyo. Right now, our marine debris program is centered in Puget Sound, greater Puget Sound. So inside waters, pretty still, not the big waves and the vast beaches that you all experience. And then we have some outer coastal sites that are some in Washington, but down in Oregon. And so we're doing testing now to just see, are there large differences between inside waters and outside waters? And in the types of debris that we see? And the answer is yes. So we're seeing real differences in types of debris, in how long debris lasts, and in basically in how quickly that debris breaks down, and where that debris is. So we look at really small pieces of debris, things that are about the size of a cigarette butt, down to things that are the size of a nurdle or a little plastic bead. And then we look at things as large as a boat or a dock. So huge, big size range. And that small debris is some of the debris that's the most harmful, because that's the debris that's going to be ingested by fish, by seabirds, and slightly larger submarine mammals. Some of our medium-sized debris that's floppy and loopy is highly dangerous because of entanglement, right? So a loop that's floppy is something that a seal can put its head through, right? that a bird wing can get entangled in. If it's very large, that a migrating whale can get its fluke stuck in. So we're looking at the characteristics of the debris, and we're starting to map the harm to wildlife in particular areas. So what we can see on outer coast beaches is a buildup of that really small debris, that little stuff, and it's because it gets caught in the rack zone. So where we see dried seaweed and seagrasses and laid down in sequential lines down the beach with receding tides on a low tide sequence, the small debris gets captured in those places and builds up over time. So we're starting to be able to get a picture of where debris is found on beaches and the types of beaches that are going to capture the most debris. So I'll be showing some graphs and slides about that on May 1st, May Day. So from Earth Day to May Day. If you want more about that, happy to have you come join us.
Hey, that reminds me of a question I have for you, Julia, which is basically you talked about beach rack and the beach all that washes up on the beach, and now we've lost 93% of our kelp forests along the coast here. Are you seeing that signal in the birds and bird abundance that you're finding on the beaches?
A signal from the loss of kelp?
Yeah, because there isn't as much on the beach, and it's also depriving the environment of quite an ecosystem.
It's true. That's exactly true. No, we haven't seen a relationship between loss of kelp, that incredible three-dimensional forest habitat that we see in the nearshore environment, and a change in the pattern of beach birds on the beach. And I think that's merely because there aren't many bird species that are actually using the kelp as a habitat. Certainly there's some indication that some of the smaller murrelets, marble murrelets, may be associating with kelp, but we also tend to see them much more in some of our more protected places. The exposed beaches are a little too much for those small guys. But I do expect that we might be seeing shifts in other kinds of things that are washing up. You know, I would love to see a program. You know, I want the beach bird program. I want the marine mammal stranding program. I want the crab carapace program, right? And I want the beach rack program. And I want the barnacle molt program. So one other coastal story that I'm going to tell on May Day is a story about Velella by the wind sailors, right? So these are little jellyfish. They're actually a colonial organism. And we've just put together a new data story on Velella. And so just to get, spoiler alert, when we see blooms of that species, of Velella, we have evidence in COASST that bloom stretches 1,000 kilometers. Wow. 1,000 kilometers, right? That means that from Cape Flattery, at the tip of the Olympic Peninsula, all the way down to Elk, there's Velella in big Velella years. So that's not a billion, that's a bazillion, right? Because you all know in a Velella year when you go out on the beach, I mean, you're crunching through potato chips, right? It's amazing. And we did a calculation that suggested that the wet weight, so when the Velella comes in, that the wet weight with our lowest, most conservative estimate of Velella hitting the beach is the weight of 6.5 adult blue whales.
Whoa, wow.
6.5 adult blue whales, right? Made up of these tiny little gelatinous organisms. That's how much organic material is coming into the coastline. It is phenomenal. It's a great story.
Oh, I can't wait to hear it. That's awesome. All right, let's go to a question from Bill, who says, the chronic oiling pattern in Washington, do you think this is due to large commercial ships or small boat traffic in and out of Grays Harbor and Willapa Bay?
Fabulous question. We actually think it might be due to both. So here's a little bit of the geeked out science of that. So the Columbia River is just this fire hose of fresh water, just right, you know, spraying right out into the Pacific Ocean. And when we have upwelling events, so the movement of the surface water is predominantly offshore, the Columbia River will turn to the south and flow off the coast of Oregon, but be pushed offshore. So all of the things that are in the Columbia River get pushed offshore. But when we have a downwelling event, which happens when we have storms, so the predominant movement of the surface water is onshore, the Columbia River turns to the north. And in that case, that fresh water gets slammed into the coast, into the Long Beach Peninsula and into the Grays Harbor region. So all the water from the Columbia River ends up right along the beaches. And so we actually think that's why we're getting more oiling, ghost oiling carcasses in Washington than in Oregon, and that it's tied into Columbia River water and thus into traffic predominantly coming in and out of the Columbia River. But we have some models on that, so stay tuned, Bill, until next year, and we'll all be able to talk about that.
All right, well, Bob has a related comment that basically says, coast of Washington mortality, perhaps a result of tanker bilge washing, and we did not burn much fuel to do this.
Yeah. So as Bob points out, there is, of course, the tanker and general shipping route all the way up and down the coast there, and we may be seeing effects of tankers. But, you know, interestingly, Bob, we're looking at the VMS data, the vessel management data, and so there we can look at ship tracks of ships of different kinds. And so we're using that data to try and create a base model of if it was just the fishing vessels, if it was just the tankers, if it was just the cargo ships, what would we see? And so those data, fantastic data set, combined with the coast chronic oiling and some really sophisticated oceanographic models out of the University of Washington and Parker McCready's lab, all of those data sources. And I guess that's one of the other things I really want to say on the science side of things. You know, COASST stands as a fulcrum between two communities. The participant community, we could not exist with all those folks out on the beach doing the work for us, but also our fellow scientists at academic organizations and at federal labs. So any data that we put together in a story, we're reaching out to the scientific community to work with us. So all the papers that we do in the scientific community have lots and lots of authors because it's everybody working together. And so, you know, that's one of the really cool things about what we do. We can draw in the science community as well. So yeah, lots of great modeling in physical oceanography on that story.
Well, I think that's all of our questions, and we're almost at our time. So that was a wonderful presentation. Julia, we couldn't have celebrated Earth Day better. Thank you so much for being our inaugural guest on our virtual Science Talk series. Thanks to Wendy, if she's out there, for putting the Science Talk agenda together. Wendy Felsen is one of our board members. She's awesome. Thanks to Sarah, who's out on the beach every day and talking with Julia and all of our counterparts with the Marine Mammal Center and the California Academy of Sciences. It's a community, like you said, that is working together, figuring out what's going on our beaches. So thank you all so much for spending your evening with us. Again, if you want to support the Noyo Center, we'd be more than happy to do that, help you do that. And I strongly encourage you, you see this is a powerhouse program, to take one of the COASST trainings and become a COASST volunteer. as well as the Noyo Center volunteers. Certainly let us know. You can sign up on our website for Noyo Center, and I'm sure the same with Julia. So thank you so much. Go out, learn something, be safe, be healthy, and thanks again, Julia, for everything you've done.
Night, everybody.
Night.